to Digital Shifts, also known as Corporate Evolution Tales. Join us as we dive into the dynamic world of digital transformation. From illuminating case studies to captivating narratives, we uncover the stories behind companies' journeys toward digital excellence. Whether you are a seasoned corporate leader or an aspiring innovator, our podcast explores the shifts, challenges of modern business evolution. Hello, everyone. This is another episode of Digital Shifts, aka Corporate Evolution Tales. And today, my guest is Bill Shander. Thank you both so much for being my guest today. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start from a quick introduction. I think this is basically where we are always starting. So tell us about your experience, anything that you would like our audience to know about you before we will dive into digital transformation.
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. So, I am an information designer, which means I take information of all kinds, often data, and my job is to sort of design experiences out of it to make it understandable for people. So, that's data storytelling, explaining data with narrative, and data visualization, creating visual experiences that help the data become more understandable for everybody.
Okay, I think this is another part of digital transformation, actually, like digitalizing the data, maybe. Let's, if that is allowed to be said. But yeah, amazing. So if we will start from very broad kind of topic. So what is digital transformation for you? What it is in your world?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. So, my career, excuse me, began over 30 years ago, and I was doing in the very early days website design and development. And so, the web sort of was this new thing back in the mid to late 90s. And so that was sort of like that moment where every organization on earth realized they needed to digitize. They needed to start to use the web not just as a marketing platform, but that
Mhm.
everything that they do needed to become transformed into a digital format. And so I've been involved in this digital transformation from day one of my career. And my work evolved to be focused on the data storytelling and data visualization, but of course, digital transformation projects are all about that. It's all about sort of, taking this stuff out here in the real world and creating digital experiences out of it, which means a lot of data being tracked and collected and managed and then therefore needing to be reported. And so, digital transformation has been like literally at the center of everything I've done for my entire career.
Mhm.
Specifically now, I don't do digital transformation projects per se, but I'm very frequently brought in the middle of a digital transformation effort in a company because that's when their people most
Mhm.
need to really learn the skills that I teach. Because these days I'm an information designer, that's what I do, but mostly what I do is I teach those skills in workshops and in online classes on LinkedIn. When companies are in the middle of a transformation process, which of course everybody is kind of all the time these days, my job is to
Yeah.
help them do a better job communicating about it.
Yeah. Agree, definitely. And you mentioned people, and what I'm always highlighting is what part and how big influence people actually have during digital transformation. Because sometimes companies are thinking, okay, we are digitalizing, so it's just integrating some tool or platform. But I think, and I would like to know also your opinion about this, that people are actually big part of digitalization. They can either support it or make it so hard to shift to this digital world. So do you think that people are the kind of like the part that is actually influencing the digital transformation, or is just about the technology?
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. In fact, the technology to me, honestly, I mean, obviously it's like the base, it's the foundation, it's what is happening, but it is in some ways, many ways, the least important part, honestly. And I think that's always
Yes.
been true. The fact is, we are humans. Humans are what organizations are. And as you just said, some humans will support it. Some humans are going to fight against it. Some humans will be indifferent to it. Some humans will be just completely unaware of it. Like all of those human things are going to be at play. And that is like literally the only difference between a successful digital transformation and
Mm,
a failure. So yes,
yes.
it's all about the people. And there's 100 ways that it can go wrong or it can go well, right?
Right.
Like when the people are
Right.
involved, and there's a million anecdotes, a million stories, a million psychological, attributes that can all play a role in how it goes.
Yeah, definitely. And while we are speaking about these processes, I would like to know, do you think there are some specific like stages or phases from where the digitalization is starting? This is more like for those companies that are considering to start their digitalization or from where they can start it. So do you think we have some phases for it, some spot from where we can start when we are thinking about digital transformation?
And I think that, to me, the most important thing organizations need to do is really at the very, very, very beginning. And you could almost say before it starts, right? Like it's truly, why are we doing this? Are we doing this transformation because everybody else is doing it? Are we doing it because there's some new fancy tool that we need to try, or someone told us we need to try, or the media is talking about it endlessly, so I guess I should try? Or are we doing
Hmm.
it because there's a strategic reason and we really understand this thing and we know that it's going to help us in ways A, B, and C? So I think that a lot of organizations do things, try things for kind of all the wrong reasons. In fact, I wrote a book last year called Stakeholder Whispering, and the basic idea is that we are given tasks by our stakeholders, such as a giant digital transformation project. And our stakeholders often don't know what they need or why they're asking for it. And our job as humans is to not push back and assume that they don't know what they're doing, but to recognize that all humans at all times are flawed beings. And we always do things frequently because of our subconscious, because, like I just said before, everybody else is doing it. The media says we should do it. There's this fancy new thing I should try. Whereas we're not sort of taking that moment to step back and ask ourselves, really, why are we doing this thing and what are we trying to get out of it?
Hmm.
So, stakeholder whispering and the idea is about, really digging into that. Our job as workers is to help our stakeholders probe those ideas and say, okay, you want to do this digital transformation project. Let's talk about why, what are the goals, and all this kind of stuff. And so,
Yeah.
if we do that very strategically for longer than maybe you feel like you should at the beginning, then the entire process will be better because we won't implement that technology that really isn't right for our organization. We won't waste hundreds or thousands of hours and then millions of dollars on this thing that may not be actually what we need.
Yeah, agree. I think it's such important thing to start actually from these objectives and like understanding why. And a lot of my guests are continuously speaking about this. And sometimes I think that exactly like stakeholders, they are just saying we need digitalization, for example. But they are not, I would say, like they don't have this understanding of the goal, why they need it. It's just because of the hype of, for example, AI being somewhere in the process, or it's
As an
really something
example.
that can exactly, exactly, or it is just like something that is really going to improve the process or the work quality, etc. So, but generally, regarding the challenges, did you see, based on your experience, some challenges when companies are considering digital transformation? Maybe some highlights for other people or our audience to know not to step on kind of thing again.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is what we're talking about, the why. And, what I think is interesting is that, why is sometimes a hostile question because, this leader says, and everybody on earth right now with AI, as you said, is saying, we must do AI. Okay. Why? What do you mean why? Like, of course we have to do it. And so simply asking why isn't enough, right? And so, we have to, that's why I call it stakeholder whispering, because you have to get to why without just asking why, right? And so that the art of that conversation is very nuanced. Now, to your question, how that happens and the types of things that can occur in these conversations is really endless. It's not like I have specific examples or advice I can point to simply because it's so simple. Every digital transformation project that I have seen fail always comes back to a lack of clear thinking, the clear
Agree.
strategy for the why. And we were talking a moment ago about how you got to do it at the beginning, but it's not just at the beginning. The beginning sets the stage, and okay, at the beginning we decide: are we doing this? Yes or no? Okay, are we choosing this technology or that technology? Okay, who's the team that's going to do it? Okay, that's all the
Mhm.
beginning stuff. But then at phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 12, 800 of the project, you got to constantly circle back to that why. What are we doing and what's the actual goal? Because I'd say that's the
Mhm.
other place where these projects fail is we have a clear why at the beginning if we're lucky. And then 6 months in, everyone's like, running and gunning and, oh, there's this new feature in this thing. Let's implement the new feature. Oh my God, like this is so exciting and cool. Oh, I heard that, our competitor's doing it. And so we get so obsessed with the feature list that we forget
Yeah.
to circle back to the, wait, why again? What are the goals
Mhm.
again? And actually implementing only what is really needed for that.
Yeah, agree, definitely. And when we speak about these challenges, I think like why is exactly where we need to start with this digital transformation. But do you think, like we spoke at the beginning about the people, right, being the main part of kind of this process? So, do you think there are some insights maybe from your side regarding like how we can make sure that people are the part of digital transformation rather just automatically being engaged of it, maybe because of fear of the change that like all human beings are, I think, automatically afraid of change. But generally, like, are there any insights that you can share regarding this part, like how we can handle people while we want to start or we want to continue with digital transformation?
Can you say the question again? How to what with the people?
Yeah, how to make sure that like they are not against of this digital transformation, because usually what we see is the fear of it.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, it's really interesting with projects like this where, the question becomes how do you get people to sort of behind it and to support it? And you got to think about
Hmm.
that from two different directions, right? Because there's the top down, how do we get our employees to embrace this thing that we're doing? And of
Hmm.
course, bottom up, how do we get some of those leaders who maybe aren't quite on board with it to embrace this thing that we've all been implementing? And, what it usually comes down to, once again, is having that strategic thing, the why answered. Because if we have answered the why properly, then everybody will be on board, even if they are a little intimidated and afraid. But if there's a strategic reason for the organization to do it, then we have a strong why. Then, in
Hmm.
theory, everybody should be excited and involved. Now, obviously, there are going to be exceptions, and there are going to be some people whose jobs are threatened by this thing, or at least they perceive it that way, et cetera. But if you have a strong why, then leadership, top down and or bottom up, sort of advocacy
Hmm.
can will at least have the opportunity to communicate
Yeah.
enthusiastically about it. Because digital transformation projects, one of the reasons they fail is often because of lack of clear communications, right? So
Hmm.
you need a why to communicate, and then you need good communications, to sort of make the case. And making the case is always, it's always going to be, audience driven. And so if I'm trying to convince somebody of something, um, I need to think about what they care about. And so that's about empathy. I have to have empathy for whoever it is I'm talking to. So let's say I'm talking to a frontline worker and this new digital transformation, let's say it's AI, they're afraid it's going to replace them, right? Which is a very valid concern in today's world. The only way I can allay that is by really trying to understand are they afraid of that?
Hmm.
What specific things do they think are going to happen? And how can I allay their fear? And so I have to really understand where they're coming from and communicate the why. And hopefully I have an answer, which is not threatening. Hopefully the answer is, yeah, your job is safe. Of course, if their job isn't safe, then you're never going to convince them to get behind this thing. And
Yeah,
so
of course.
that's a different conversation. But again, strong why and good, clear communications with audience empathy in mind.
Yeah. Agree, definitely. While we are speaking about also like how to handle it and the insights, do you think or do you have experience with some technologies that are supporting, or you will suggest some technologies that are actually supporting digital transformation?
It's funny. I'm a technology last person, which is ironic because I've been in the world of technology my whole life. I used to do web design and
Hmm.
development. I did digital transformation. I'm a programmer. Like I love technology, but I honestly think there is no technology that I could ever or would ever want to point
Hmm.
to say this is going to solve your problem,
Okay.
because every technology has its pros and cons. Every technology has its benefits, and it has its whatever the opposite of benefits is. It's trouble spots. And so to me, any technology might help and it might not help, but it always comes back to the people, to your first question. And so, yeah, I'm gonna percolate on that. Maybe by the end of our conversation, I'll have a better answer, or an answer that says, yeah, but maybe there's this thing over here. But honestly, I think it's really all about the human element, the strategic thinking and the good communications that usually is what really solves these things.
Yeah, I think it's totally valid answer actually, because myself being in this world, like in IT world and being from the company that is actually offering digital transformation, I wouldn't say there is something specific that I will offer to everyone, because as you said, it's very like specific thing, and maybe it will work for one company, but it may not work for another company because of the case that they have, because of the process that they have and want to digitalize, right? So I wouldn't say it's specifically about maybe technology, but more about like how much the technology can support the processes, how much it can cover actually, and support the people. As you said, like some people can be afraid of being replaced by some technology, but maybe those same people can actually work with that technology and make their work more efficient. So it's not always about the technology itself, but how it will be implemented inside of the process that you have in your company. So
Yeah, I think
amazing.
it's a great point. And that's the thing about AI, especially, right? Like, and people I think are starting to understand this that like, yeah, this technology might replace you. We always are afraid of this. But the people
Yes.
who jump on board and are the first ones to really learn how to exploit and really use that technology, of course, they're going to be the safest people. And so, yeah, that's always good advice.
Yes, definitely. And before we will wrap up, I think I would like to ask you about some advice that you would offer to other companies or individuals to take into account when they just want to start their digital transformation journey. So, what would be your advice to those companies? How they can start?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it really has to start with, that strategic thinking, which usually means conversations with stakeholders. And, the fact is, a lot of organizations, they think the stakeholder is the CEO, right? The CEO makes all the decisions and everybody else just does what they say, right? But that's not how it works, right? Like this technology over here, that this digital transformation that we're gonna implement, these stakeholders, yes, it's the leaders, sure. But this particular technology is actually supposed to make the frontline worker over here more efficient, more profitable, whatever the goals are. They're stakeholders too. And by the way, your investors are stakeholders, maybe, and the
Mhm.
press might be stakeholders for some companies. And by the way, these middle managers over here are stakeholders, even though they don't usually touch this technology. So in other words, you have a very broad list of people who care about or
Mhm.
are going to be affected by or might affect how this project goes. And so, companies really need to have broad and deep conversations with all of those stakeholders, really figure out what they all actually need from this thing that you're thinking about implementing long before you pick the technology, put in the team in place and all the other stuff. So what I said at the very beginning, you have to have those real strategic conversations. Why are we doing this? What's it for? And who's going to be using it? Who's going to be affected by it? If you really dig deep into that stuff, the implementation part, I don't want to minimize it and say it becomes easy, but it'll be way less problematic if you really dig out those things first. So that's what I always recommend. And a lot of companies they pay lip service to it. They'll have, oh yeah, we talked to a couple executives and 3 employees. Well, is that really a deep dive? Maybe not. And one of the things I always recommend to people is that you think about everything as being about user experience. Because in the end, everything is like, right now, people listening to this podcast, they're having an experience of a conversation. They're not like getting an information download straight into their brain, right? And so when you acknowledge that everything is a user experience, you realize that this digital transformation you're implementing is going to create an experience for the employees using it, for the customers they're going to get the results of it, et cetera. And so, user experience is there's an entire user experience design process when we're creating products. And so dig into that and really understand what your users need and your stakeholders, whoever they may be, and then everything
Mhm.
gets easier.
Agree. So we are coming again to why and understanding that why and making clear and have the clear goal. Amazing. So I think this will be everything from my side, but I would like to ask you if anything you would like to highlight to our audience before we will end up this episode.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would love to say to people that I kept circling back to the why because it's something that my entire career, every project that I've seen go poorly is because it wasn't circled back to often enough. You need to do it like
Yeah.
every single day. Why? And that's why I wrote my book, Stakeholder Whispering. It's because, no one is taught the art of how to get to that why and how to help your stakeholders get to the why that they need. And I think it's a really important topic and it applies across all kinds of domains. So I certainly would love people to check it out. If anybody does read it, I would love to hear what you think about it.
Amazing. I'll make sure to put the link in the LinkedIn post so it's easier to reach out to you and also find out about the book. Thank you so much, Bill, for being my guest today. And yeah, have a great day.
Thank you so much. You too.